you get to a certain age and you don't want to acknowledge your ignorance. Like, you really don't. You're like, man, I should know what a 401k is, but I just don't. Like, and you don't want to ask anybody. And so you just sort of go like, well, I hope this doesn't affect me. And then
welcome to the FI Show, where you get a behind-the-scenes look into financial independence. Here's your host, Cody and Justin.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the FI Show. Before we dive in too deep, let's check in with the co-host, Cody. How's it going?
Hey, what's going on, Justin? Just got back from yet another awesome ski weekend. Went up to Smuggler's Notch in Vermont, and I was expecting ice. Usually there's ice there every year, and I was pleasantly surprised. It's nice and powdery. After getting back from Colorado, I had honestly low hopes for the Northeast, but the Northeast came out strong, and it's kind of getting warm up here. I don't know if you've been checking the weather, but it's going to be in the 50s next week. I'm kind of nervous that there's not going to be much skiing left after this next couple of warm weeks happen. So I'm glad to get this last one in. I am going on one more little ski trip next weekend, but who knows if the snow is going to be around. What's going on in your life, man?
Well, first of all, I'm certainly jealous of all the skiing you're getting in, but I'm just under 3 weeks away from my own little 5-day stint at Vail, so hoping the snow holds out for us and we get some good days in. But yeah, for me, this weekend was a little less adventurous on the travel sector. But as I was doing my expense tracking that I do every month, as you know, I got to looking at a couple things and thought there's a couple of neat things I could kind of highlight from a flipping perspective. So with work, I won this award that was kind of like an annual award for last year. And at first, my boss was like, yeah, you're going to get this like monetary reward with it too. And I got excited and I ordered myself this $500 pizza oven because I've been getting real into making pizzas. And I was pumped because I'm like, they said it was going to be more than $500. Like, we're good. This is going to cancel that out. Then I find out it's actually a catalog and you get to pick an item. And these items are worth around $500. And I was like, oh no. But instead of just picking, some random watch or something that I actually didn't need, what I did is I quickly went and looked at some different websites where you can flip gift cards. And I just typed in each brand of gift card to figure out which one had the highest exchange rate. So I found one that was $500 that they would instantly give me $425 for. So I selected that one, flipped it, turned it into $425 cash. And that brought the cost of my pizza oven down to, it actually ended up being about $60 out of pocket. And then I did something similar with our furniture. I have to give Leslie credit. She actually handled most of the postings, but we had like a weight bar, some random weights that we got off the corner. Actually, when we were in Boston, right before we moved, we threw it in the U-Haul. 2 random chairs that were left behind here and a little bench that was somebody was going to throw away that I had kind of redone. And we were able to sell all of that and make enough money plus some to buy a nice set of outdoor furniture that we just put on our patio, like some brand new stuff. So I think it's just a quick reminder that there's always money out there. There's always interesting ways to either lower your expenses or get that, that new thing you've had your eyes on. There's always a way to earn it. So now you've got the update from us. And before we bring in our guest for today,
keeping track of your net worth is one of the most important things you can do on your journey to financial independence. If you don't have an idea of what your net worth is, there's no way that you can keep your quote-unquote score. One of our favorite tools to keep this score is called Personal Capital. If you haven't already started using it, it's an online software that basically compiles all of your data, it crunches all your assets, all your liabilities, and spits out a net worth number and allows you to track it day by day, month by month.
Yeah, Cody, one of the big things that hold people back when they're doing activities like tracking their expenses or tracking their net worth is just they look at it as a big burden. And this allows you to go in with one username and one password and access as many financial accounts as you have. These can be loans, these can be 401ks, these can be HSAs, bank accounts, credit cards. They're all linked there. The other thing I really like about Personal Capital is it's very investing focused. So you can go in there and look at your allocation across your entire portfolio. So you don't just look at your allocation in one type of account, but your allocation as a person completely. And if you want to use the same tool that me and Cody use to track our net worth, which is completely free, you can do so at thefishow.com/PC. That's thefishow.com/PC.
So today on the podcast, we are sticking with our basically how you teach young adults or people in their teens these concepts of money, these concepts of financial independence. And we thought there was no better person to bring on than Jake. Jake, like Dan we had on last week, Dan Sheeks of Sheeks Freaks. Jake is a high school teacher And he was a high school teacher whose passion has been teaching personal finance to kids for a while. Eventually, he saw a need in the market for a resource that he could give people in his community, in his class. And so he ended up writing this book, How to Adult. It's more of a general personal finance book. The way he explains it is like a pocket guide. So you carry this around, you're a young adult, you're just getting into the workforce, or you're someone in high school, and you want to quickly reference what's the difference between a Roth and a traditional IRA, or what's a 401k, or how does compound interest work? All the basics of money that most people don't get. And this is an awesome, just little pocket guide you can keep around. It's an awesome resource for teachers, for parents, anyone who has someone in that age range who they want to teach a little bit more about personal finance.
And obviously, younger people, they've got the internet, they've got their smartphone, but I think to have a resource like this to where you can quickly go to it, it's already synthesized for you, you're not spending a bunch of time, because if it's a lot of effort, if there's a high bar of effort, then a lot of times, as humans, we'll just say, we'll just take a guess at it. I also think that it was awesome that Jake is really looking to get this book in as many hands as possible. We're excited for you to hear all of Jake's tips today for educating those younger folks in your life. And if you want to step back and look at those show notes and see some of those links, you can do that at thefishow.com/Jake. That's thefishow.com/Jake.
Yeah, I think it started like a lot of people, sort of through mistakes, unfortunately. That's the unfortunate truth about so many people in financial awareness or financial literacy. You eventually get yourself backed into a corner, and I'm no different. So going way back, I'm from a very rural, small town. I definitely didn't have any formal classes, no formal education in terms of, finance, definitely no classes like that. I went to college and took out loans. I didn't even know how much I took out or how many loans I had. And then about 26 years old, I'm like, I need to get this together. I need to actually take control of this. It started kind of slow. And I think like a lot of people, I felt perhaps a little bit, humiliated or, a little bit embarrassed about, man, I should know this stuff. I should have taken control. I should have taken responsibility of this. And I started reading, just every resource I can get my hands on. And I learned, that's a pretty common feeling to have. Like a lot of people have been in that same situation, which at least provided a little bit of comfort to me. So I started reading, just going through everything I possibly could. And pretty quickly, within, after I just devoured everything I could get my hands on, I started putting some of these plans into action. And pretty quickly, you'd see a marked difference in, my finances and sort of the trajectory that I was on. My main role is I'm a teacher, and that sort of inspired me to this theme that I kept running into again and again, no matter what I read, was time. If you can really take advantage of time, take advantage of compounding interest, avoiding these mistakes. And I thought, man, I really wish, 26 is not a bad time to learn this, but again, effectively now is the best time to learn it. But if you can really learn when you're young, really take advantage of it. And so that was sort of the genesis of my getting involved in finance, and more importantly, my desire to teach others about it.
So obviously through this teaching, your hope is that you're going to kind of cut people off before they ever have to run into a wall or feel the way you felt. But I'm always love digging into kind of what flipped that switch, what made you change. I know you said you're kind of sitting there looking there, maybe a little disappointed in yourself, but was there a mentor? Was there something that happened that really made you feel like you hit bottom? Was there anything that really just said, hey, I'm going to make a change today. I'm going to start picking up these books and I'm going to make a difference?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's sort of a combination of things. Being in sort of, I guess, financial, just very stagnant for a long time, not making a lot of progress, not seeing my debt go down. For me, because I do consider myself a bit of, an academic, I've always went to college. I have a couple master's degrees, but when I actually started trying to, actually actively learn this stuff, I realized it's not that difficult. It's really not that difficult. And once I understood that this endeavor is not insurmountable, that it's not impossible, and once I could actually see a couple, positive steps in the right direction, that really sort of lit a fire in me. All right, I can really do this. So there isn't one individual moment where I need to turn my life around. I didn't have a rock bottom moment, luckily, but I did sort of have a real fire once I realized these things can really make significant changes. And so for me, I just sort of got hungry once I realized, oh, my debt's going down faster than it ever has before. And, my net worth is actually going in the positive direction. So I really dove in once I could start seeing those sort of tangible steps. That's when I really, I guess, got the bug, if you will.
And so kind of just working with your timeline here. So when you're 26, how much later is it when you become the high school teacher and you start getting really involved teaching other people about personal finance and these sorts of subjects?
I've been a teacher since I was 21, actually. So
Oh, wow.
as soon as I graduated college, I immediately went overseas teaching English. So I'd already been teaching for a while. And at this point, I'd been teaching at the high school I'm still at for just, it's either my first or second year. So it's early, and I'm teaching English literature at that point. And as I start reading these books, so about 26, that's when like I said, I kept going over that theme, back to it, like time. And I'm sort of kicking myself. And again, a lot of people who don't really take control of their finances, maybe they're like 30, 40, even 50. They might hear 26 and be like, oh, you're lucky. But still, like when you're reading, when I was 26, I was still like, it'd be a lot better if I learned this earlier. And so this theme kept sort of, coming back. And I thought, I can actually do something about this. I'm already a teacher at this school. Maybe I can propose a class. And fortunately, I work at a school with administration that's very supportive of that. And I sort of pitched the idea and, told them my own story and what I want the class to be. And they said, yeah, they gave me a green light. And so the very next year, I already had an idea for a curriculum I want to develop. And of course, there's a wealth of resources on the internet. And so that's how I brought it to life, actually. So it wasn't long after. It was probably, 26, I hit my own financial renaissance, if you will. And so I hit that. I really get everything down as far as my own knowledge. And really by the next year, I'd introduce the course to my students.
So obviously you had been teaching for a while, but you had been teaching personal finance for very long. So this is kind of a new thing for you. Curious, because I think a lot of times we can learn just as much from our failures as we can the successes. Was there something that you thought, man, this is going to resonate with kids, this is really going to work, when you went to start trying to teach personal finance to kids that actually didn't resonate? Maybe something people could learn from, parents in the house, like maybe this is not a good way to go about it.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I really think one of the greatest benefits, or like the feature of my book that I think works, is that it's relatable. And so this is a great question because I started teaching personal finance and it was just boring. Like a lot of the resources out there, you really have sort of two ends of the spectrum. You either have very academic, textbook heavy. That's like, you're not going to get a kid to walk in and be like, yeah, sign me up for that. And then on the other end, you have almost like patronizing or just like very elementary. And it's not really, it's nothing that the students can really build off of. So in my class, I realized I'm going to have to start coming up with sort of my own materials and my own examples. And really what I've learned teaching personal finance is so unique, and the huge advantage, like an incredible advantage of teaching personal finance, is you will never have a student in your class, and we've all been in this situation, you're listening or you're studying a Shakespearean sonnet and you're like, when am I going to use this? Like, why am I here? Why am I in this classroom right now? Like, why am I learning this? And you will never have that in financial literacy or personal finance. You'll never have that. So I really leaned into that. So instead of, if I'm teaching index funds, I'm not just going to read you the Investopedia definition of this thing. I'm going to tell you specifically, all right, if you use index funds, here's what you can rely on. Historically, these are the interest rates or the ROI that you can expect. And really, I can show students, all right, if you're putting in $200 a month, like what can it give you? If you start when you're 18, you could literally be a millionaire from this. And then they're like, actually looking at these figures, and it's very relatable, so that they are really connected to it. And you can give them tangible numbers like, hey, do you want to be a millionaire? Like, yeah, of course I want to be a millionaire. And for so many students, I had the same idea when I was younger. Like millionaires are, they drive the flashiest cars. You have to have the coolest stuff. You have a job that pays, crazy amounts of money. And that's just not the case. Like, and I don't want to say creating financial independence or wealth is easy, but if you're organized and you understand this stuff when you're young, if you have a game plan, it's really not that hard. Like, it's pretty doable, especially if you understand that, building wealth is sort of long-term. But again, yeah, so there were certainly failures in the classroom initially. And I think the biggest thing was just making it interesting, making it approachable, and just letting the students know, like, you're knocking on the door of this reality. This isn't something far-fetched. This isn't something abstract. Like, you're right here. And my students, they really took to that. Like when I show them, simple stuff like a compound interest calculator. And okay, if you're 21, you get your first job, you're making $65,000 a year. Let's put it in with an 8% ROI. if you invest for 45 years, how much will you have? And it will blow their minds. Like, no way. And then they're like, all right, I'm in. Like, sign me up. Yeah, tell me exactly what I need to do. Like, tell me how I get there. It doesn't sound that hard. And so then they sort of get fired up. Yeah. So the long sort of roundabout answer is make it fun. Make it real. And it goes both ways. You can show them the virtues and the beauty of finance, but then there are plenty of statistics you can show them that will bum them out. Like it's not hard to show them, average saving rates, like the percentage of Americans who have even $10,000 saved for retirement. That's a quick way to put some fear into the hearts of my students. They're motivated once you show them stuff like that.
So, I mean, you're showing them all this stuff, but at this point, I mean, I guess it still is an abstraction. I'm not trying to take away from what you're doing at all, but what kind of practical use do you, make them, not make them do, but what kind of practical applications do you give them? Do you challenge them to, I don't know if they're 18 yet, but hey, open an IRA, or hey, start this account. Hey, start investing with Robinhood. Like, do you actually give them tangible action steps so they get a little more excited about it? Or is it mostly just conceptual stuff?
No, I mean, exactly what you just said. So I have students who are, to be in my class, you have to be a junior or senior. So I do have some students who are 18. And I do have students who are, a lot of my students actually have part-time jobs. And that's almost always what they want to know. Like, if I have some extra money, what should I do with it? But for as far as like practical application, I had a student this year because I taught index funds and IRAs and Roth versus traditional in the first semester. And she came in November and she's like, hey, I just put $250 into a Roth IRA. We got a mutual fund. And I was like, yes, that is exactly what I'm talking about. So of course, you can't mandate that. That can't be an assignment. You have to go do this. But again, there are so many great resources that it's like, there's one like How the Market Works is great. You get $10,000 of, fake money, and then you can invest in whatever you want. And the interface actually looks pretty similar to a lot of like brokerage accounts. It's got almost all the features. So I do that with students who don't have money or don't have, they don't have to meet the requirements to invest in or fund certain accounts right now. But I definitely have had students who, that's more of a sort of like stay after class, like, hey, Mr. Coos, I got a question for you. My grandparents gave me $1,000 and I sure do like those numbers you're putting up with the compound interest calculator. Like, how can we get there? So there's stuff like that. And then I also have students who will sort of show me their budget and be like, what do you think I should do with this? But really through the course, it's great because a lot of times once we get to that section, give my students a shout out. They're incredible and they all know each other really well. So they'll volunteer, be like, hey, I got my paycheck last week. Here's my budget. And then like, we'll just tear it up as a class. It's like, all right, you're doing really well. Or be like, no, what are you doing? Like, this is not what you want. So that's about as applicable as far as like real life application we get in the classroom. Of course, I'd like to have more, but with 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds, only so much you can do.
No, I'm not sure exactly what the demographics are of your school. Like, if it's just a public school, or if there's a lot of different maybe income ranges that the households that they're coming from. But have you noticed any correlation between how into this class that kids were based on maybe the financial upbringing that they had, or how wealthy their parents were, or maybe struggles they seen their parents have?
That's also a great question. So I teach at it's an all-girl Catholic high school. It's a private school, and I think most people, when they hear that, they're like, all right, this is probably like a very affluent, and it is. I mean, it's definitely I would say above average as far as the parents' incomes. But we also have plenty of students who are here on scholarship, and so there is a pretty there's a wide range of those students. But to answer your question, it's sort of a mixed bag. So on one hand, I don't know everybody's financial situation. Sometimes I do, I have a pretty good idea. But certainly there's more of I don't know if there's more of an interest, but there's certainly more of an eagerness from the students who I know are not near, the top of the tax bracket, the highest earners. And there is sort of I can really feel like sort of a fire, like, oh yeah, I want to get there. Like, that's what I want. And then I've also had the other side where it's like any class, I've had students like, I don't feel like I really need to know this. I think I'm going to be all right. But fortunate for me, that's very rare. But, I've also had students who I know are from families that are doing really well, and they're still like really hungry. I think you're just going to come across those people who are like, yeah, I want to maximize, my potential, my efficiency, and, my time and my money. So I don't know if I've seen any constant or remarkable trends in that sense, but for the most part, I really have to say I've been surprised with how interested my students are. I came into the first year, I was like, I don't know how popular this class is even going to be. And we're a small school anyway. I think I had like 9 kids sign up. But then like after that first semester, every student was like, you got to take this class. And more importantly, I get so many like emails and just like fist bumps from parents. Like, thank you. Like, I'm so glad that somebody's teaching my kid this. I really appreciate it. And now the class is really popular. We've had this we might have to expand it into like 2 sections at this point. It's probably like my biggest class I have. So I think overall for lack of a better term, there's a market there. I think people want to learn this. It's just the great riddle with especially young adults is like, what's the best resource to do this? And how do we get this sort of, to as many people as possible?
Well, I was going to say when you were talking back a couple of minutes ago, I'm jealous. Like you're teaching traditional versus Roth in high school. Like to even think that would be a topic discussed in a high school class is just mind-boggling to me. I barely learned, I had like the personal finance class that was required and it was like balancing a checkbook. It's like, really? Like no one's doing that in 2020, but I kind of want to pull from this quote. And I read an article, I think it's from Newsbreak that you were interviewed in. And you said that there's a lack of actual teaching that goes on. And this was about a question on personal finance teaching in high schools. And you just kind of alluded to it. Like there is a huge market there. Obviously, you're doing everything you can, Jake. At your school, you have multiple sessions going on. Students are raving about it. But how can, this is for the teachers listening, parents, how can we kind of start to, get legs on this whether it's a statewide, national movement? Like, is there some kind of grassroots thing that's coming up and some network or, some way we can get this to way more people than just the kids who are interested in your high school?
Yeah, I mean, that is the ultimate question. I mean, that is the billion-dollar question for, financial education. I think there are a lot of problems that we have to hurdle here, but a lot of it I really think is the content. I think there's a real gap between, and don't get me wrong, I think if you were to go on the internet, there is a resource literally for everything. That's a fantastic resource. There's a fantastic resource to teach, let's say, traditional versus Roth. But there is not one place that has all of it, basically. And I think that's a really large chore to ask of a young adult, especially like a high school student, college student, to go search all this stuff on their own. So I think sort of combining forces and really figuring out or developing a curriculum that's palatable to young adults. That's the other thing. I think there are a lot of companies, there's a lot of efforts, like mainly by like, let's say financial institutions, financial companies that can write great stuff for, let's say 25 to 30-year-olds or 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds that's really easy to understand. Because if you're 30, you don't need to be entertained while you're reading. You're usually in panic mode at that point, right? Like you really need this information. So you already have the motivation. But for young adults, I think you really have to walk that line between I need to keep their attention. I need to make this palatable. Of course, cover all the details or all the stuff that's still important for the students.
So while you were talking there, it kind of reminded me of something that Grant Sabatier, the guy, we visited your class. It was awesome. But something he's mentioned before, and I think he mentioned in the talk here, is how, a lot of the people that are putting out this content are the big companies, the billion-dollar companies who make so much money on students getting into credit card debt, students getting student loans. Like that's their agenda. They make so much money on that. And they're the ones pushing a lot of this financial information. Of course, you could come across a blogger with a good heart who has awesome info, but they don't have the marketing dollars that these huge corporations have. So I mean, from a teacher's standpoint, how do you kind of combat this problem? And, what do we have as normal people to kind of, I guess, coerce kids to not read into this stuff that may be steering them in the wrong direction?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question in general. I mean, not only to the specific, large companies that, yeah, it's totally pandering, like you're ripping people off on one hand and then you throw out a couple really cute articles about how to, stay out of debt and stuff like that. Just sort of, so to the point of keeping students away from, I guess, bad information in general. I think especially right now, like if you go on, my students will come in and be like, oh, I found this great YouTube video about this guy who makes $12,000 a month in passive income. And he says, I can do it too. And I'm like, no, you really can't. Or at least you probably can't. Like it's very unlikely. Does that sound realistic to you? So I think sort of cutting through and finding a reputable, solid information is a real chore for anybody. Especially right now, there's so many speculative tactics in general. I mean, you look at like Bitcoin, you look at the market in general. And I'm not saying any of those things they're going to pop or anything, but there's a lot of money in them right now. They're riding pretty high. And, historically those things, as I say, trees don't grow to the sky. So there's definitely a concern to teach students this. As to your question, like, how do you stop students from falling for these things? I really think it's starting at a younger level, starting when you're younger. And like, my students understand now, even after, so my semester is a year-long course, even after a semester, like, if you want to be a millionaire, you need to plan for, this is an endeavor. It's like a very long process to get there. You don't do it overnight. If you want to do it overnight, you're going to have to take incredible risk. It just doesn't happen. So, and more than anything, if you just understand how wealth is built, compounding interests, like, you need time for that to compound. And if you don't have sort of these tools in your toolkit already, yeah, basically any article you come across that says, here's what you need to do, you're going to be excited about it, especially if that article says, like, hey, let's make a bunch of money quick. Or there's somebody on their Instagram with a Lamborghini and, flaunting all their cash. Like, that's obviously very attractive to anybody, but especially attractive to young people. But again, I think it all goes back to just, we need to teach this at a younger age, and we need to make it. You're right. So that thing you said about your high school class was, just like very elementary. Like, here's how to open up a checking account. Like, we need to aim higher than that. Like, I think that's really what it comes down to. We need to aim higher than that, but we need to make it approachable. That's basically sort of my thesis throughout this whole thing. We need to really provide a firm foundation. There's a lot of books out there that keep it abstract, and they love to think of the examples of, like, don't spend $5 at Starbucks and you could save a couple dollars every day. It's like, okay, that's true, but you're not set for life once you learn that. Like, that's not going to be the entire foundation. So we need to have a much higher goal than just, how to open a checking and savings account, but we need to really make a concerted effort to put this information into a style and a format that students are going to be able to understand.
So you've been highlighting kind of a lot of the deficiencies that we have and the information that's out there, your kind of opinions on it. And you also alluded to a book that's coming out. I think maybe this is a good opportunity for you to talk about what led you to want to write a book, maybe what's the overarching theme of the book, the target, things like that.
I think after my third year teaching my class, and again, at this point, Justin, I've already gone through my blunders of, like, all right, I know what not to do. Second year, I figured out, I developed the curriculum. All right, this stuff really does work. There are really great resources out there. Like I said, like, one of them is NGPF, like Next Gen Personal Finance. They're great. And so one of the reasons they're great is because they're free. So it's just an incredible resource. And most at the high school level, most like financial literacy teachers that I know use that. But so their curriculum is pretty expansive, and some of it's unfortunately a little bit outdated. They're a nonprofit, so they don't have billions of dollars for people to be updating these things. And basically, so over the years, let's say when I get to, all right, if I'm doing my investment section, or if I'm doing my retirement, or if I'm covering even like insurance, I cover insurance, I have to go to all these different websites. I'm going to all these different places. And I thought, it would be a lot better if I just had sort of a one-stop shop, if I could put all this information in one spot. And so at this point, this was a couple of years ago, because I've been writing my book, or I finished my book, but it took about a year, a little over almost a year and a half. Anyway, so at that point, I'm like, I wish somebody would write a book. And I think, I don't know, I hit the train late, but as far as like motivation, like, hey, you should write this. I probably should have thought that earlier, but I was like, all right, I'm going to start this. And I really just sort of planned to make like a 50-page sort of pamphlet, basically, that you can print out and just do it for my students. And then I wrote the first chapter. I'm like, oh man, this isn't going to be 50 pages. And I was actually like kind of mad about it. Like, oh, this is going to be too long. And then I passed it along to actually sort of a member of our school community. And he said, you need to just turn this into a book, like, full on book. And so I thought, okay, well, I guess I can try. And then at this point, so the final product's about like just over 200 pages. And I've been working with an editor, but really, I was adding to it as the year goes on, as I'm teaching, if I get to credit cards, and then I'm like, oh yeah, here's a resource, or here's an example I use to teach in class. That's a really good one. This is what I should put in. Or like, this idea I've seen before is really great. So it's really, I've sort of assembled it as I've been teaching. And again, the motivation just comes from, if this was all in one place, again, we have to make it easier for students to access this information. And if we're, like I said, requiring them to do a scavenger hunt all over the internet, that's not doing them any favors. So I really wanted to put it all into one spot, one place where they can go. And essentially, if they sit down and read it, I truly believe they'll have like a foundation they can build upon.
So I know one of the overarching themes, Jake, and you just kind of mentioned this before this past question, but it's not about the coffees. Like it's really about that big stuff. It's about keeping the housing low, keeping the transportation low, not getting into multiple six-figure student loan debt. Like making those big choices makes everything. Like you can go out and spend $50 every weekend. You can get the coffees, whatever, as long as you get those big things right. I kind of love if you could talk in a more thematic way. Like how do you kind of illustrate that throughout the book? Like, do you use case study examples? You kind of use overarching themes per chapter? I'd love to just hear a little bit more about the book structure in case you have anyone out there who's thinking about giving this to, their high school son.
Yeah. Okay. So the book structure is it's broken down into 11 chapters. So I start with interest because I really, that's the foundation, whether that's going to be debt or investing, compound interest. Like it really starts there. I've got basic banking. And again, so it starts pretty elementary and then it goes into paying for school and whether or not school is the right choice for you, how to like navigate the FAFSA subsidized loan versus unsubsidized loans. And so I've got, 11 chapters covering the various topics that I think are the most important for financial literacy. Basically, I explain them. So that's sort of the beginning of the chapter. So I explain each one, and then I've got something called How It Works, where I just give an example, and so it's like, meet Angela. And so, for example, if you're doing like the budget, I've got one with a hypothetical girl named Trinity, which is actually a student in my class. And so like Trinity's the bad example. So she's like living too large, and exactly like you said, she's spending too much money on housing. She's spending too much money on transportation. She's spending too much money on food, like the three big killers, which I discuss in great detail in my chapter on budgets. And then I give another example of Tamara, who's her sister, who has the exact same salary. And, so I go through her budget and it really looks like, she's having a great life. She's doing well, but her budget's great. Like there's no problems that she's not living, she's not practicing like austerity measures. She's having fun, but she's just like responsible with her money. So I've got the example and then I've got something called personal connection. And so personal connection for each chapter, I go through, fittingly a personal connection I have with the topic. And in this one, I really tried to, and it wasn't hard, for like credit cards, I talk about how I was an idiot when I was 21 years old and like maxed out a credit card, because I think that's also something that's very important to me is, you get to a certain age and you don't want to acknowledge your ignorance. Like you really don't. You're like, man, I should know what a 401k is, but I just don't. And you don't want to ask anybody. And so you just sort of, you're like, well, I hope this doesn't affect me. And then, that's the worst possible thing that's the worst thing you can do. So I really try to sort of be, vulnerable or just like hey, if you've made this mistake, it's okay. Like, it's all right. You're not alone. Hopefully, like you can learn from my mistakes. Like I'm telling you now, so you don't have to fall into these missteps that I've taken. So that's the personal connection. And then I've got another one, just like key takeaways. So, bullet points, top 5 to 10 points of the chapter, whatever chapter I'm doing. And then I've got build your skills. So it's basically variety of questions, starting with simple stuff like, all right, if you have $5,000 in debt and you have a 6% APR, how much in interest are you paying for that first month? Stuff like that. And so after I've given you the lessons, there's some stuff to test your knowledge. And of course, there's like an answer key in the back so you can see. I also provide some resources, like different calculators and stuff like that. So that's really the format of the book. And I think the examples, and again, being a teacher, I've really seen, I could drone all day about a topic, but they're like, just show me how it works. All right. Like, just tell me, like, give me an example of what this looks like. And so providing those, I think, is really effective. And being a high school teacher, it's great because I've written these before and I've sort of tested all this because like I've used an example before and like, Mr. Coos, bad example. This is trash. Like, no, this is dumb. Or like, you're trying to be funny and you're not funny. Or, okay, this one like is sincerely funny. So the examples I've sort of tested with the audience, I think that those are perhaps the most helpful after you've already been told what, let's say again, back to a 401k is, like, how does it actually work? Tell me how to do it. Show me, like, how can that actually influence my life?
You called out the part about it already being tested. I think that's probably one of the coolest things when you're looking at a resource like you're going to put out is that as you're writing it, you've had kind of a live audience to bounce these things off of and to hone it in and make it something that's really useful. So I think that's cool. One clarification thing I just wanted to see, and maybe it's both, but do you think this is a target more for a resource for teachers to use or more for a book directly to the high school students? And if it is a resource, I mean, if it's both, or even if it is just a resource directly to the high school students, like, what are your thoughts on how you get, these students who aren't in a class to pick up this book? Like, how do you get them to get interested in it?
Yeah, so I really do think it's both. I have my network of other financial literacy teachers, and it's a very common question that we all have. We do have NGPF, which is a great site, and there are many great websites out there with plenty of resources, but there's no real book out there. And you could get a textbook, and that, again, like, I don't think that's the approach. If you go overly academic, like, nobody wants to carry that around. And again, I want somebody to like buy this or to have this book to just keep with them. So if they get a job and they don't know, if I do Roth or traditional, what's the difference? Like, just pick this up real quick. All right, so you've got this book. Insurance, like, oh man, what's a deductible? Like, what's a premium? Oh, I could just pick up this book. So I don't think the textbook is the option, but your first question, it's 100%. I think it's a great text for students within a classroom. If you do have the class financial literacy, I think it's fantastic. And again, it's not a giant textbook. It's just something, whatever you're teaching, I'm pretty confident that anything you're going to be teaching at the high school level, like, my book's going to be able to cover it. And then you also have the very important question. All right, so for those students, the vast majority, most schools don't even have this class. For those students who don't have this class, how do we get it in their hands? So something I've done already, and it's been going pretty well. So, I told you I'm from a very rural, small town, just a little farm town up in Northern California, north of Sacramento. So the county is called Colusa County. And there's one guy in my town, and he's the president of a little bank up there. And I said, hey, I would love to get this in as many hands as I can. Do you think you could help me out? And he's like, whatever you need. So I was like, I'd like to get a copy of this book to every high school graduate in the county. He's like, done. So I was like, oh, really? He's like, yeah, banks, we've been looking for something like this, and we're not really sure how to give back. And I think that sort of goes with what you're saying about, these institutions a lot of time are taking a lot of money from us. So how do you do this in a way that's, give back in a sincere way? So using that model, I did the same thing down here. I've just been going to banks and financial institutions, and I'm saying, hey, I really think this book is going to help. I send them my manuscript, and they're like, and the feedback I've gotten back so far is like, yeah, this is fantastic. This is great. I haven't confirmed it yet, but the second one, it looks like it's going to go through as well. Another bank down here in like the Ventura County area. Looks like they're also going to place an order for a bunch for the high school graduates around here. For me, I'm giving these at cost, but again, like, just getting this into as many hands as possible, because I really don't think that it's going to, I don't think this is going to be like a viral trend or anything. I'm not that foolish, but I do think like the best way for this possibly to get into as many hands as possible is to actually have, an 18-year-old, 19-year-old, 26-year-old, like, hey, this is great. Like, this book actually works. It taught me the stuff that I need to. I understand it. It's not completely boring. Like, that's going to get it in way more hands than anything I can do. Like, nothing sort of more sad or pandering or obvious than trying to market something to young adults as cool when they clearly don't think it's cool. So I don't think there's going to be any glorious marketing campaign on my end where I start a financial revolution single-handedly.
You're doing awesome work, man. No, congratulations for what you're doing. I think it's amazing. And you're right. Like, being able to have that all-in-one resource in your backpack or, at your desk at work when you're a young adult or in high school, that's just so invaluable. It's something that so few people have access to. I know something you mentioned, wealth building is a slow process. It's not like a get rich quick. It's not overnight. You're not, getting the $40,000 in 1 month selling stuff on Shopify, Instagram ads and stuff. But Jake, you are kind of a counterexample of this, because if I'm not mistaken, I think you won $50,300 in one of the fastest ways possible. This is a get rich quick scheme if I've ever seen one. You want to tell us about that?
That is true. I guess, yeah, I am a hypocrite in that regard, I suppose. So I did once make $50,300 in 45 minutes, the old-fashioned way, by winning on Wheel of Fortune, America's favorite game show. So you are right. I did win that money, but for instance, I don't plan on, I got a taste of that, and that is not my strategy to continue that process. I'm glad that it happened, but it is not my, that's not the plan I have moving forward. But yeah.
Dude, how does that even happen though? You're from a rural small town. How do you get a Wheel of Fortune and win 50 grand?
I was eating pho with my now fiance, and there was just Wheel of Fortune on in the background, like behind me. And I kept turning over my shoulder, and I was solving the puzzles, because when I was in 6th grade, I lived for like the entire year at my grandparents' house, and they're old people. Like, they watch Wheel of Fortune constantly. And my grandma was a beast at Wheel of Fortune. So I was like, by the end of the year, like, I need to be able to compete with her. Anyway, so I watched Wheel of Fortune like every day. And then so my fiance was like, you got to apply. And then, I applied, made a dumb video. One thing led to another. And then Yeah, it worked out. I'm glad that she told me to do it. As far as it was the most lucrative financial investment I've ever made. applying to Wheel of Fortune.
Well, I did something earlier this year, kind of in honor of Wheel of Fortune. I named I had a van that I'd converted into a camper van, and I named it Vanna White because it was a white van.
Yeah, so. I support it. I love it. By the way, she's incredible. If you're ever wondering, there's probably no doubt about that. But yeah, she was incredibly sweet. She's great.
The last question I had is almost along those same lines, but like if there's somebody who hears this episode and they're like, you know what, I want to go talk to my local bank and I want to try to work out a deal and get them in contact with you, is that something you would be up for? Is that something like, as people listening to this, can they help you in any way get this into more hands other than just directly purchasing it themselves?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, if anybody out there listening is connected to financial institutions, if you really want to help, again, like I'm not looking for a profit here. I can do these books at cost. Yeah, I mean, you don't even have to be involved in finance, but if you somehow have the means and you think that this is a noble cause, which I certainly do, I would love to speak, and if it's more of a local project, maybe if you're from like Austin, for example, and you have like, man, I would love to get the Austin community, the young people here sort of connected with this. I would love to, collaborate, some sort of partnership there. Again, like this is I'm very fortunate in the sense that the thing I do for a living is also a passion project. Like anybody who's sort of in the, I guess the personal finance community, like if you've been on, whatever it is, there's just such a profound impact that, what you guys are talking about, like financial independence and sort of digging yourself out of debt can do to people. If I can give that gift to somebody else of, my own financial renaissance, as I called it earlier, if I could do that for somebody else, like mission accomplished. So yeah, if anybody has those endeavors or plans, yeah, reach out.
Sweet. Well, I know we have thousands of amazing listeners, and hopefully some people step up to the plate because Jake's legit. We literally hit you up the night before. Me and Grant came in your class the next day. You were awesome. Your class was awesome. So definitely can vouch for you. So hopefully we have some of our listeners hit you up, but in order for them to do that, they need to know the best places to reach out, find more about you, find more about the book. Where are the best places to do that?
Absolutely. So the best way, so right now my email is just jake@htapersonalfinance.com and my website, www.htapersonalfinance.com. So on my website as well, I have sort of condensed the chapters within my book into videos. If you're more of, a visual learner, I do cover things like traditional versus Roth, credit, what's a credit score, how do credit cards work? So I do have some resources there. And then I do also have a Twitter that's How to Adult Finance on Twitter.
And is that also the name of the book, Jake?
Oh, yeah, the book. I guess you need that. So the book is How to Adult Personal Finance for the Real World.
Jake, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's such a noble cause, and it's something that I think a lot of us in this community would love to be a part of, and glad to see somebody who's actually taking it and running with it. Can't wait to see this book in a lot of kids' hands and to see the impact that it has, on the generations to come. So thank you so much for coming on the show and giving us some time.
Hey guys, I really appreciate it. It's been a blast, and keep up the good work. I really appreciate it. Again, on behalf of everybody out here who's working to, sort of spread financial knowledge.
And as always, if you want to check out our Facebook group page, you can do so at thefishow.com/community. And we always appreciate those 5-star reviews. They help us get great guests like we had today. And if you're interested in supporting The Fi Show, you can do so by checking out some of our partners over at the resources page, which can be found at thefishow.com/resources. And thanks for listening.